Welcome to today's deep dive into the relatives of one of the most common and widespread domesticated animals, the junglefowl. Not familiar with the name? These are the closest wild relatives of chickens, which are farmed for eggs and meat worldwide. Wild junglefowl are often overshadowed by the domesticated descendant, but they're fascinating in their own right. They also give us a great opportunity to explore the process of domestication. What features do chickens share with the junglefowl? What have they lost along the way? It's a question many people have probably never considered, but chickens are actually an excellent case study in how humans have shaped animals over time. If you'd like to learn more, check out the document in the description with research papers and image credits. Junglefowl belong to the order Galliformes. This group includes heavy-bodied, ground-feeding birds, many of which have played important roles in human history. Of course, we're focusing on chickens today, but Galliformes also includes domesticated or semi-domesticated species like turkeys, quails, and guinea fowl, as well as game birds such as pheasants and grouse. In the grand tree of bird evolution, Galliformes are most closely related to the Anseriformes, the ducks, geese, and swans. The two orders together form a larger group, often called fowl. In this pairing, the Anseriformes are the waterfowl, and the Galliformes are the landfowl. While waterfowl is a common term, Galliformes are more often referred to as game birds, though landfowl is still technically correct. Galliformes are divided into 5 families. First is Megapodidae, which includes the brush turkeys and scrub fowls. These birds are famous for their unusual nesting behaviour. Instead of using body heat to incubate their eggs, they bury them in mounds of decomposing vegetation. Found in Australia, New Guinea, and various Pacific islands, there are 21 living species today. Several others became extinct relatively recently, likely due to the spread of humans through the Pacific. Next is Crassidae, home to the chachalakas, guans, and curassows. Found in Central and South America, this family includes 57 species, most of which feed on fruit and gather in noisy flocks. They have strong beaks and claws, long tails, and in some cases, surprising size. The great curassow, for example, can reach up to 1 meter or 3 feet long. Then we have Numididae, the guinea fowl. This is the smallest family of Galliformes, with just 8 species, all native to Africa. One of them, the helmeted guinea fowl, has been widely domesticated and is now found in many parts of the world. Following that is the family Odontophoridae, with 34 species of New World quail. It's worth noting here that the term quail isn't very scientific. It refers to several distantly related groups. The New World quail are, as the name suggests, native to the Americas. The best known is likely the California quail, with its distinctive top-knot plume in males. While most other quails are in the final family in Galliformes, I want to briefly mention the button quails. Despite their similar name and appearance, button quails are not part of Galliformes at all. They belong to a completely different order, Charadriformes, the shorebirds. Even though button quails don't live along coastlines, they're actually shorebirds that have adapted to a more terrestrial lifestyle, a great example of convergent evolution. Back to the actual Galliformes, the largest family by far is Phasianidae, which includes 188 species. With that many, it's an incredibly diverse group, but all of its members are large-bodied, ground-dwelling birds. It includes pheasants, junglefowls, turkeys, Old World quail, peafowl, and many more. But among all these game birds, who are the junglefowl's closest relatives? For that, we zoom in to the tribe Gallini. This includes the francolins, small terrestrial birds that feed on insects and seeds, with around 19 species across 5 genera. Even closer, though, are the bamboo partridges in the genus Bambucicula. Now, partridge is another loose term that doesn't hold up scientifically, and the bamboo partridges are a good example. Despite the name, they aren't closely related to any other birds called partridges, and are in fact the only ones included in this tribe. There are 3 species of bamboo partridge found across much of Asia. While they can fly, they prefer to hide when threatened. And when flushed, they often fly uphill, which is highly unusual for game birds. And finally, we arrive at the junglefowl themselves, the genus Gallus. They are native to South and Southeast Asia, though thanks to their domesticated descendant, they now have a global presence. There are 4 living species of wild junglefowl. While they differ in appearance, vocalizations, and habitat preferences, they also share a number of distinctive traits, setting them apart as a coherent group within the game birds. Like many other members of Phasianidae, junglefowl are terrestrial birds, spending most of their time foraging on the ground for seeds, insects, and other small invertebrates. However, they are strong flyers over short distances and will often fly up into trees to roost at night. They are also diurnal, active during the day and typically found in forested or shrubby habitats, though some species tolerate more open environments than others. When threatened, junglefowl will usually attempt to flee on foot before taking flight, using short bursts of rapid wing beats to escape into cover or up into the canopy. Sexual dimorphism is pronounced across the genus. Males are generally much more ornate, with long arched tail feathers, elaborate combs, and brightly coloured plumage, often featuring rich reds, golds, and iridescent greens. Females, by contrast, are more cryptically coloured, with browns and buffs that provide camouflage while nesting or foraging. Males are known for their loud crowing calls, which serve both to establish territory and to attract females. While each species has its own variation, these crowing behaviours are universal across the genus, and they've played a key role in the evolution of vocal communication among junglefowl. Breeding systems are typically polygynous, with dominant males courting and mating with multiple females. Males engage in ritualized displays that can include wing flapping, tail spreading, and specific body postures. Fights between rival males are common during the breeding season, involving pecking, clawing, and dramatic leaps. Females build shallow ground nests, often concealed in thick undergrowth, where they lay a small clutch of eggs. After laying, the female alone incubates the eggs and raises the chicks, which are precocial, hatching with open eyes and able to walk and feed themselves shortly after birth. In the wild, junglefowl tend to be shy and wary of humans, often avoiding contact and retreating into dense vegetation. However, in areas where they're protected or live near villages, they may become bolder, a behavioural plasticity that likely contributed to their suitability for domestication. Junglefowl live within strict social hierarchies, commonly referred to as a pecking order. While the phrase is often used informally today to describe dominant structures in human groups, it actually originates from chickens. Among junglefowl, individuals establish rank through pecking, posturing, and visual displays. Birds that receive more pecks generally sit lower in the hierarchy, with reduced access to food or mating opportunities, while dominant individuals control the best resources. This structured social system helps maintain order within the group, reducing constant conflict and clearly defining each bird's place in the community. Despite their relatively modest size and inconspicuous lifestyle, junglefowl exhibit a wide range of adaptations suited to life in tropical and subtropical habitats, from dense lowland forests to scrublands and foothills. The green junglefowl, Gallus varius, is the most distantly related of the 4 living junglefowl species, native to the Indonesian islands of Java, Bali, and Lombok, and a few surrounding isles. This species is immediately recognizable by its vivid, iridescent plumage. Males, in particular, are a riot of color, with shimmering greens, blues, and bronzes that give the bird its name. Unlike the more familiar red junglefowl, the male green junglefowl lacks a clearly defined comb. Instead, it has a distinctive coral red wattle structure that appears more flattened and fused in the upright comb of other Gallus species. This comb is streaked with metallic blue and green hues, making it as much a display feature as a signal of species identity. Males also bear long, curved sickle feathers in the tail, though these are generally less exaggerated than in red junglefowl or domestic roosters. Green junglefowl are found in a variety of habitats across the island range, from monsoon forests to coastal scrub, but they tend to avoid high altitudes and dense interiors. Like their relatives, they are ground-dwelling foragers, feeding on fallen fruit, seeds, insects, and other invertebrates. Despite being capable of flight, they mostly stick to the ground during the day, only flying up to low tree branches to roost at night. In terms of behaviour, the green junglefowl is thought to be more strictly polygynous than other species. Dominant males maintain loose harems and will defend a territory that includes several females. Interestingly, their vocalizations also set them apart. The male's crow is higher pitched and more drawn out than the familiar cock-a-doodle-doo of the red junglefowl, often described as a flute-like, bubbling trill. Here's what it sounds like. It's a surprisingly musical sound for a bird so closely related to the domestic chicken, and one that helps distinguish this species even in dense vegetation. Although not globally threatened, green junglefowl do face pressures from habitat loss and hybridization with feral or domestic chickens. This hybridization in particular is a concern on islands where feral chickens have become established, as it can blur the genetic and behavioral identity of the wild population. In short, Gallus varius is a striking outlier within the junglefowl genus. Its island distribution, vibrant plumage, and unique vocalizations make it a vital piece in the puzzle of junglefowl evolution, and a living glimpse into the early branching of this fascinating group. Next, we come to the best known of the junglefowls, and the one with a global legacy, the red junglefowl, Gallus. Native to South and Southeast Asia, it's widely considered the primary wild ancestor of the domestic chicken. But in the forest and scrubland it still inhabits today, the wild red junglefowl lives a life quite distinct from its domesticated descendant. In the wild, red junglefowl are shy, wiry birds, spending most of their time foraging on the forest floor for seeds, fruit, and insects. Males are striking, with glossy copper-red plumage, iridescent green-black tails, and a large red comb and wattles. Females are more muted in colour, with brown and tan plumage that provides excellent camouflage. These wild birds are more slender and agile than domestic chickens, and capable of short, explosive flights when threatened. Their social structure typically involves a dominant male maintaining a small harem of females, similar to other junglefowl species. Males use loud, familiar crowing calls to announce their presence and defend their territory, the very call that has echoed around farmyards and villages for thousands of years. But these wild birds are far from farm animals. In fact, protecting them as a distinct lineage has become increasingly complicated. One of the greatest threats to the red junglefowl isn't just habitat loss or hunting, it's genetic dilution. Domestic chickens, technically still the same species, can readily interbreed with wild junglefowl. In areas where free-ranging chickens are common, hybridization is widespread, making it harder to find genetically pure wild populations. Over time, this can erode the traits that make red junglefowl distinct: their wariness, flight ability, feather patterns, even their vocalizations. This presents a strange conservation dilemma. Because chickens are so widespread, the red junglefowl as a species is still listed as least concern. But what's at risk isn't just numbers, it's identity. In some regions, the true wild red junglefowl may be vanishing in everything but name. Our journey now takes us to the forests of Sri Lanka, home to an endemic member of the group, the Sri Lanka junglefowl, Gallus lafayettii. While it shares a common ancestor with the red junglefowl, this species is quite distinct, both genetically and visually. Males are instantly recognizable, with vivid orange to golden plumage, a blue-black tail, and a distinctive comb. Unlike the simple red comb of other species, the Sri Lanka junglefowl's is a two-tone structure, a red base topped with a bright yellow central patch, a flame-like appearance. Females are smaller and more cryptically coloured, with brownish plumage and subtle patterning that helps them blend into the forest undergrowth. Sri Lanka junglefowl are primarily found on the island's wet and intermediate zones, although they can also be spotted at the edges of tea plantations or village gardens. Their behaviour resembles that of their relatives. Males establish territories and call out with crowing vocalizations to attract mates and ward off rivals. Their call is similar to that of the red junglefowl, but typically shorter and more abrupt, often with a clipped staccato quality. As you can hear, it is quite distinct from the other junglefowl calls. In terms of breeding, Sri Lanka junglefowls are believed to be seasonally monogamous. Pairs form during the breeding season, and the female takes sole responsibility for nesting and chick rearing. Like other junglefowl, the chicks are precocial. They hatch fully feathered and ready to follow the mother almost immediately. Unlike the red junglefowl, hybridization with domestic chickens seems to be far less common in this species, likely due to both geographic isolation and behavioural differences. As a result, it remains genetically distinct and is currently listed as least concern by the IUCN, though habitat loss and hunting still pose localised threats. As the national bird of Sri Lanka, Gallus lafayettii holds cultural significance as well, appearing in folklore, art, and traditional symbolism. It stands out as a colourful and charismatic symbol of the island's unique biodiversity. Our final species is the grey junglefowl, Gallus sonneratii, a striking and often underrated member of the group, endemic to the forests and scrublands of peninsular India. As the name suggests, males of this species are dominated by grey plumage, with intricate patterns of white and black barring across the body. But there's no shortage of colour. Long golden hackle feathers adorn the neck, each edged with a glossy black border that reflects iridescent blues and purples in the sunlight. Their comb is a bright red, and the wattles are large and prominent. Interestingly, unlike other junglefowl, the grey junglefowl lacks an upright tail. Instead, the tail feathers droop and splay outward in a more rounded form. One of the most unique features of the species is found in the legs. Males grow a series of sharp, bony spurs on each leg, sometimes more than one per leg, used in aggressive displays and fights during the breeding season. In terms of behaviour, grey junglefowl are similar to their relatives. They are ground-dwelling, foraging through leaf litter for seeds, insects and other invertebrates. Males are territorial and emit loud ringing crows to announce their presence. Their call is quite distinct, a series of rapid, almost metallic notes. This is not a call you can confuse with other junglefowl. The short bursts of sound are extremely different from anything else we've listened to today. The grey junglefowl has a patchy distribution across its native range, largely avoiding the drier regions to the north and west. It tends to favour dense undergrowth and mixed forests, although it can also adapt to cultivated areas and edges of human habitation. One of the most intriguing aspects of the grey junglefowl is its genetic legacy. While the red junglefowl is the primary ancestor of domestic chickens, grey junglefowl have contributed to the gene pool as well, particularly in features like the yellow skin in many domestic breeds. This introgression seems to have occurred after domestication, through later hybridization events between free-ranging chickens and wild grey junglefowl. Despite this, the species remains distinct, and is currently listed as least concern by the IUCN. However, as with other junglefowl, increasingly human activity, habitat fragmentation, and interbreeding with feral domestic chickens are emerging concerns. Let's now turn to the domestic chicken. It is technically considered a subspecies of the red junglefowl, so its scientific name is Gallus domesticus. It is one of the most widespread and numerous vertebrates on the planet. Found on every continent except Antarctica, chickens are raised for their eggs, meat, feathers, and in some places, even companionship. But behind this global presence lies a story of ancient domestication, one that links them directly to the junglefowl we've just explored. Genetic and archaeological evidence points to the red junglefowl as the primary wild ancestor of domestic chickens, with domestication likely beginning in parts of Southeast Asia, including regions of Thailand, Myanmar, and southern China, as far back as 8,000 years ago. However, the story isn't entirely straightforward. Genetic studies have shown that other species of junglefowl also contributed to the modern chicken genome, particularly the grey junglefowl. But there are also traces of green and even Lanka Junglefowl DNA in some chicken populations, although these contributions are smaller. This points to domestication as a complex and ongoing process, not a single event, but a long interaction between humans and multiple wild junglefowl populations over time. So, what changed as chickens became domesticated? In terms of morphology, domestic chickens are incredibly diverse, shaped by thousands of years of selective breeding. They range from sleek bantams to massive broiler breeds, and from plain brown hens to extravagantly feathered showbirds. But underlying that diversity, many of the core traits of junglefowl remain intact, from the basic body plan to their ground foraging habits, dust bathing, and even their social structure. However, domestication has altered several key behaviours. Chickens are typically less flighty and more tolerant of humans than their wild relatives. Many breeds lay eggs year-round, unlike junglefowl, which breeds seasonally. In junglefowl, chick rearing is handled entirely by the female, and this trait has also been retained in most chickens. But the strong territorial instincts of wild males, essential for defending harems, has been significantly reduced in many domestic breeds, especially those bred for intensive farming. Another key difference lies in flight ability. While their wild relatives rarely take to the air, they still can, usually in short bursts to escape danger or reach roosts. For many domestic breeds, however, especially those bred for size, flight has become nearly impossible. Their heavier bodies and reduced wing strength mean they're largely grounded, a stark contrast to the more agile junglefowl. Interestingly, vocalizations have changed too. The classic cock-a-doodle-doo of the rooster is descended from the red junglefowl's crow, but has been exaggerated and standardized through generations of human selection. In fact, let's compare the two. Here is the call you are likely all familiar with, that of the domestic rooster. Now, compare that to its wild relative. Hear the difference? It is hard to describe, but the domestic version ends with more oomph. Here they are back to back for better comparison. It is a little subtle, but the difference between the two is easy enough to hear. Similarly, the egg-laying cackle, alarm calls, and food clucks have parallels in wild species, a reminder of their evolutionary roots. The term rooster, in fact, is a linguistic offshoot of domestication's cultural reach. In much of the world, the male chicken is called a cock, a word with deep historical roots. However, in 18th century Puritan America, the term began to fall out of favour due to its sexual connotations. The more modest rooster, derived from the bird's roosting behaviour, was adopted instead and remains standard in North American English. Another key chapter in chicken domestication comes from an activity that is now widely condemned: cockfighting. The practice of pitting male birds against one another predates written history and was once widespread across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas. In many early societies, cockfighting was not just entertainment, but a ritual activity, often tied to status, divination, or displays of masculinity. Selective breeding for aggression, stamina, and physical traits, like stronger spurs, led to the development of distinct fighting breeds. Although now banned or heavily restricted in most countries, the legacy of cockfighting has left a lasting mark on chicken genetics and cultural identity. It's worth noting that domestication doesn't happen in isolation. Chickens spread quickly along trade routes and were incorporated into many ancient societies. From the jungles of Southeast Asia, they moved into the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and eventually the Americas. Along the way, they adapted not only to new environments, but to cultural roles, appearing in rituals, mythology, divination, and daily life. Yet, despite this long and varied history, chickens remain, in many ways, not too far removed from their junglefowl origins. In fact, feral chicken populations around the world, whether on Pacific islands or abandoned farms, often revert to behaviours and social structures seen in their wild relatives. In a way, the domestic chicken is a living bridge between wild and human worlds. It tells us about evolution under human influence, about what traits persist, and what can be reshaped by thousands of years of shared history. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of junglefowl. From the forests of Java to the foothills of the Himalayas, these birds are more than just the ancestors of domestic chickens. They're vibrant, adaptable survivors, each with their own unique story. The 4 species we've explored today, green, red, Sri Lanka, and grey junglefowl, highlight the diversity and complexity hidden behind what many consider an ordinary bird. And when we trace the path from wild junglefowl to the domestic chicken, we uncover a tale of evolution, culture, and thousands of years of shared history. So, if this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's so much more to discover about the animals that live alongside us, both in the wild and in our backyards. And the more we understand, the better chance we have of preserving that connection. Thanks for watching. If there's another fascinating species you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments below.